Hello and welcome to the episode of the Manufacturing Leaders Podcast with me, Mark Bracknell, Managing Director of Theo James Recruitment. Today we welcome Adam Crosby, the Director of Operations at 3D BioTissues in Newcastle. If you are fascinated by dinosaurs, if you're a fan of Jurassic Park, this is the episode to you. What an unbelievably fascinating business. 3D BioTissues based in Newcastle, set up initially via Newcastle University, manufacture via lab or create via lab a variety of things, including leather made from dinosaurs. Let me explain, or let Adam explain during the episode. So he talks about this in detail, what the business does, how the business was set up, how actually the world of science within the Northeast is actually a lot bigger than people realize, but needs help to try and keep it progressing. We talk about leadership, we talk about building businesses and everything in between. It's definitely an episode you can learn quite a lot about. So thank you, Adam, for making me aware of this tremendous business and exactly what you do and exactly what goes on inside that lab. So please click that like and subscribe and help me share the channel and the show. Much appreciated. Hope you enjoy the episode. Excellent. A massive warm welcome today to Adam Crosby, the Director of Operations at 3D BioTissues in Newcastle. How are you, Adam? You all right?
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Mark.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming on. I can't wait for this episode because we're going to learn a lot about this particular subject and some really exciting, interesting things. Before we delve into that, first question, the same question I ask everyone that comes on. What does it mean to you to be a leader?
Oh my goodness, I think it depends on the people involved. But I think there's different kinds of leadership styles. I always like to look at the sort of servant leadership style, where I'm working for everyone else in my team, and I want to bring out the best in my team. Because the better they perform, the less I have to do, really. So it's trying to make a situation where it doesn't matter if I'm in the office or not.
Yeah.
So the whole team can function. So I always I'm big on people's training, systems, processes, so that if someone's ill, it doesn't matter. We can just move on and things like that. So
I like that. That term serving, I think I've never heard that before, and I really like it. And I think it is important because I do that, and that's probably where management has changed over time because people have probably got into management now for different reasons. I think before that dictatorship model is virtually gone. I don't hear much of it anymore. And I think people now become managers because they actually want to be a part of people's career, which obviously is a motivating factor for you. Is that something? Did you develop that and realize that once you were thrust into management, or was that one of the reasons why you wanted to get into it?
I think as I developed, and I had a few good role models in some of the companies I've worked at. People who, they wanted to develop their teams, and it's like that old that quote you see everywhere on LinkedIn sort of thing. But getting people to a level where they could actually leave if they wanted to because you trained them and developed them so well.
I like that. 100%. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, people have a different mindset about that sometimes. They're almost scared of people to leave, but exactly that. You train people well enough that they leave you in a much better place than you started with. You've been the servant to your business. We'll delve back into management piece, but I'm really interested in 3D BioTissues, and I'm sure everyone else will as well. So can you tell us a little bit about the business, what it does, and then you probably have to speak to me like I'm a 10-year-old from this sort of stuff because we're going to learn together. So tell me a bit about 3D BioTissues, please, mate.
Yeah, so we're part of the BSF, a group of companies, as a larger company, but 3D BioTissues itself was a spin out from Newcastle University in 2019. So we've got Jay Connon, who's he's still a professor at the university now, but he's gradually pulling back from that. So himself and Ricardo Gouveia, who's our technical director or scientific director, set up the business together, looking at development of new cells and things like that, and looking into the cultivated tissue sector, I'll call it. So cultivated meat, cultivated skin, cultivated corneas and stuff like that for use in eye surgery and things potentially.
Wow, excellent stuff. So and that is so broad. You're going from that to meat to corneas. That I'd imagine you could essentially you could go anywhere with that essentially. So how do you decide as a business which avenue to go down based on what you do then?
I think being realistic, it's what's technically feasible
Yeah.
based on prior art and things like that. But then also looking at things of what is possible to patent
Yeah.
as a way to as a novel way of producing something. So one of our key products with the meat was that we didn't use any kind of scaffold when we grow it. If that makes sense.
Mhm.
So it's you're just producing like pure meat. It's not mushroom based or plant based or something like that. So some companies doing interesting things with that, but it's there's lots of talk about things like mouth feel. They like to talk about how does it feel when you bite it, because a key thing with meat is not just the taste, it's the texture.
Yeah. Yeah.
People can very quickly tell if something's off, if it's not right.
So how do you do that? Because obviously, meat is meat for me. It's an animal, it's meat. So how is that formed in a lab? Tell me through exactly how that works.
It's like if you were to grow anything biologically, you'll start with like a cell growth media, which contains things like glucose, growth factors, and things like that. You'd then seed cells into that, and then the cells will gradually multiply, and eventually they'll start to form tissues. Whether that is skin, meat, or eyes or anything really. It's
Amazing, amazing. And I know there's something we spoke about off air, which I was going to bring up later, but I just want to talk about it now. They are trying to, well, you're not trying to, you are developing a leather which is made out of dinosaur. Is that correct?
Yes. So it's like, so we take, like, obviously there's not a lot of dinosaur cells floating
Yeah,
around,
I
but
imagine.
we'll work with several external groups and the experts, and we're sort of essentially genetically modify, like a current cells or related cells, and then we use them to express like the material that'll be used to grow the skin, and it's so it can be generally verifiable as being isolated as like a dinosaur skin.
Amazing, amazing.
But the beauty is like it's actually a technology platform we're developing. So in theory, you can produce any kind of leather if you want to, because the thing that a lot of the cultivated leather companies are looking at is a more exotic leather sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, but what's more exotic than a dinosaur?
Yeah. Well, there's going to be people driving their car now thinking, right, Jurassic Park's coming back. This is going to be Jurassic Park in real life. So
Yeah. We had a lot of interest. One of the consultants we deal with happened to be speaking to an automotive manufacturer,
yeah.
and he mentioned that, and they got very excited
Well, yeah.
when they
Yeah, this
part.
is it. And
Yeah.
which so has this ever been done before or tried to be done before?
There's a number of companies who are producing, like I say, lab grown or cultivated leather.
Yeah.
There's variations of all kinds. The technologies can be different. The way they manufacture it can be different, and things like that.
And what can it be used for? Because leather can be used for a variety of things. So I guess, and would it look and feel essentially like dinosaur leather would? What would it be used for?
Well, that's the challenge. We deal with, like, we're working some of like the large fashion houses, and they want samples that have been
Yeah.
dyed. How does it look? How does it feel? Does it look like leather? Does it feel like
Yeah.
leather? Does it smell like leather? That kind of thing. But the beauty we found with some of our leather is that some of them are, they can be quite thin compared to normal leather, but still maintain that mechanical strength.
Okay. Amazing. So look, the 10-year-old boys coming at me now. I'm asking these sort of questions, but could this get to a level where you're making a a watch which is made out of T-Rex leather, for example? Can it be that specific?
Yeah, exactly right. So it just allows to produce a piece of leather. So then you can do anything. If you wanted to create just a wrist strap with it, if you wanted to create a handbag or something like that, you can do. So
Amazing. Yeah, amazing. Which that must be a exciting part of your job, I guess. I mean, is this sort of stuff the reason why you got into what you do?
I think for a lot of our R&D team, they get very excited about what they can and can't do. I'm very much an operational mindset, so I'm very interested in the how are we going to
Yeah.
do this rather than the what are we going to do. If that makes sense. So
And as a business, because look, that when I look at that, I think, well, that's just a business that's going to do unbelievably well financially, because there's going to be a lot of people out there who are going to want to spend a lot of money on having to say they've got a T-Rex watch on them. But then obviously the lab side, you talk about corneas and that sort of piece, you talk about university, then you think, actually, is it is it a multifunctional purpose business to do different things? Is it profit based? Where does that sort of sit? Because they're sort of quite different, aren't they, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we're part of a group of companies,
Hmm.
and we have 3D BioTissues is mainly our sort of our R&D side of things, but we also supply a couple of products for their function is they're called City Mix and Cyto Boost. They're to help other companies and when they're doing cell growth in aquaculture. So the materials you need to grow the cells are very expensive, but using our product, you can reduce their costs by like of the growth factors by like 70%. So it's a
Yeah.
significant cost saving for them. It helps them get closer to parity with traditional meat and things
Yeah.
like that. They grow
Amazing.
things with. Mm.
It's
And then
great. Go on, mate, as you were, sorry.
yeah, sorry. And then like another, this is a company, Carato. They've just got a license agreement, I think, with Canada for growing the corneal cells and replacement corneas. There's a lot of interest in that in the veterinary market, which is quite interesting for us
Okay. Hmm.
because if you imagine if you can save an animal's eye if it's been injured rather than it's great, and obviously that leads into and obviously animal testing is much simpler to get into. There's fewer hoops than it is for when you want to human testing, but if we can prove the technology with animals, it's a much easier step to prove it with people as well.
So, and which is interesting then, because is that a big part of the future that potentially you can be really massively affecting the lives of people very positively? Because if you can do that with with corneas, essentially, could that is that the next step, the roadmap for the business then?
Yeah, I think there's not only that, but there's also like a product which is it's closest thing I can think to equate it to is like when autoglass repair your windscreen, with the little gel. It's something like that they can use in someone's eye. So
Yeah.
rather, someone's got a significant eye injury, you could in theory, the paramedic comes along, just injects this material into their eye, and then they're fine. They may not even need surgery. You
Yeah.
know.
Amazing. Scaling business is difficult. How did this, how did you get involved in this business? How did it start? Tell me about the sort of the early days in that side, because it's a fascinating business and very different to a generalist manufacturing or engineering business.
Yeah, so obviously, like the business was very, it was a university startup. Everyone within it was very academic. I joined because they wanted someone who could come in and had previously done like scale up of materials. That's supply chains, processes, facilities, and things like that. So it's interesting for me because it's I've done like a work with companies like Axe and Nobel where we're producing thousands and thousands of liters of paint, but you're using like a forklift truck to bring pallets of raw materials in, whereas here you've got it's the scientist with pipette doing that. So it's an interesting one. But it's things like proving your suppliers, doing your due diligence on people like that is very very important. Like it
Yeah.
is with any company.
So it's funded by the university piece. The world of scientists, etc. And people talk a lot about the skills gap in the UK. They talk a lot about the skills gap in the northeast. What's that like in that science field then? Are there enough people coming through that route, or is that still a challenge?
I think it can be frustrating because I think we talked about it, previously. I think there's still this image of the northeast as we're all going down, we're all going in the shipyard or the mines sort of thing, even though they're all pretty much gone. But I think it is improving. We have obviously there's the old Wilton site down at Redcar. You've got the Biosphere in Newcastle, and they're looking to build Biosphere 2. So which is great because the problem is that we have there is support for like what I call incubators. So for
Yeah.
small startups and things like that, and then you've got places like Fujifilm and and down and CPI and things like that. There's not really anything in the middle
Okay.
for with some of the medium enterprise, so that can be a challenge. I think the combined authority are really helping that now. Now you've got like Newcastle, Sunderland, Gateshead all working, North Tyneside all working together because there's recently a meeting and it's looking at how can they help the the science industry in the northeast because there's a real shortage of like lab space because
Yeah.
the landlords are a bit risk averse. They don't really want if they'd rather just build an office, which is much simpler to build, and they've got guaranteed to have someone in there. If they build a lab, it's a bit more of a risk for them and more expense initially.
Yeah, of course. Is the cost of university now, and could that be a challenge? Because I imagine the bulk of people you acquire will straight from university. Could that be a challenge now in terms of getting people to do the courses to be able to attract them into these jobs?
I think we're quite lucky with Newcastle. The Newcastle got a very good biomedical science university. It's one of the best in the country. But a lot of people, they end up moving south down to, the Golden Triangle, down right sort of Cambridge and Oxford and stuff, because that's where a lot of the companies are.
Yeah.
Because, if you look at the funding profile, it's massive for down there compared to the Northeast, as I'm sure most people in the Northeast would agree with.
Yeah.
And you also get a lot of venture capital companies. Unfortunately, they are quite blinkered as well. They want people to, they'll find a company in the Northeast they like, but then tell them they have to move everything down to, like Bedford or somewhere like that, or Guildford, because they want it to be closer to them, but also closer to all the investment and stuff in that region.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. And the Northeast has got so much going for it. But actually, on that science piece, I mean, you've got Net Park, obviously, in Durham as well. It's a huge site. You've got some amazing businesses doing some great stuff. And it's also one of those places where people relocate to. They never move out again. They never move from the Northeast because they don't appreciate the cost of living, what's up here, the beaches, the parks, all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
It's huge. But it sounds to me like the government can probably do more to help that piece, do you think, then, in terms of help to scale that biotech sort of world on that side?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, like I said, I think the local government is trying to help with that, just trying to make things easier with planning rules and change of usage of buildings and so on. But it could certainly be worth trying to accelerate things like the Biosphere 2, for example, or some other facilities around the Northeast for lab startups.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be a big help, because in Newcastle and the Northeast in general, there's pretty much the Biosphere and that's it.
Yeah.
It's
great. Is it, if people listen to this thinking, I'd love to get into this world, but do I have to go and completely retrain and get a degree and et cetera? Or do you think it's an area people can transfer into from other aspects of engineering and manufacturing? Because you've had quite a varied career, Adam, haven't you, in that sense?
Yep. Yes, I mean, I've worked in sort of like heavy industry. I mean, chemistry, but with Axe and Bell, I started working in the lab.
Okay.
But then I was helping with scale up of products again. So that was taking stuff from the lab to the factory to the shipyard, which was really interesting. But it's I think depending on the role, some of the roles I think are quite niche, like the R&D team. If we want someone to come in, they need to have a PhD in biomedical science and have worked in tissue engineering and cell culture and so on. But some of the wider roles, if you've worked in manufacturing and things like operations, it's much easier to move around. If you've worked in a supply chain, there's a lot of transferable skills there. If you've worked in a manufacturing facility where you're following SOPs and procedures, again, it's all transferable.
Yeah.
You've got to have the right person as well as the right skills.
I'm very interested in culture and how you build businesses and scale businesses culturally and making sure that's right. How challenging has that been, and how important is that to the business to get the culture right, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, we've got quite a small team, of less than 20 people. So, it's very important that someone is going to be like a good fit, personality wise. So, we take great care about that in the interview process. We'll have several people will interview any candidates, and including people who are going to be working with them, not just people who they're going to be working for, because we want to make sure that there's going to because obviously if you have a small company, you have a personality clash, can be a real problem. So you don't like to avoid that. And then we have the standard procedures in place to make sure that if someone is a bad hire, we can whether get them out before the probation period's finished, or other methods, shall we say, if they're after probation and so on.
Yeah, it's how important, because I did a podcast earlier this week with a lady who's really concentrating on that diversity piece and making sure that she brings in people from different walks of life, different careers, different nationalities and all that. Given it's very specific and niche what you do, how important is that diversity piece? Because your business is built purely around innovation, essentially, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I think that's what we're trying to get away from, because, like I say, when I joined, we're very academic and and innovative and scientific. So it was, I came in as someone going, well, for example, we could really do with ISO 9001 for a lot of our suppliers and stuff like that. And a lot of the people who've come from academia, they've never really been exposed to 9001, and it's trying to educate them about why something that's on paper is not particularly exciting or obvious, but it's important in the grand scheme of things.
Apologies for interrupting this episode with a very quick announcement about my business. Theo James are a specialist talent provider specifically to the manufacturing and engineering sector. I'm incredibly proud of what we've achieved since our inception in 2015. We specialize in roles from semi-skilled trades right the way up to our TJ exec search arm of the business, both from the contract and permanent side. We offer both bespoke one-off campaigns for hard-to-fill roles or a full partnership service where we become an extension of your business. For any information, please get in touch with me or the team. I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. Thank you.
Yeah. So you're right. Diversity, I think diversity of experience is very important.
And how do you talk about the team's piece and making sure, you manage them, lead them well. How do you create a space where people can innovate? Because I imagine the business you're in, it can go so many different directions that it would be, quite a challenge sometimes. You can't listen to every single idea. You do listen to every idea, but you can't take every single idea you have. How do you create that space where people can innovate and bring sort of ideas to the table, you say?
Yeah, I think we try to do things where everyone's encouraged to offer up ideas and improvement. It goes through everything from like an improvement suggestion system where someone's got an idea for how they can make things better. They can flag that to the manufacturing director, to myself, the R&D director. We're also able to do what we call like business opportunity forms. So someone's got an idea for how they can work on it. It's a case of I think we should be doing this. It'll cost this. It needs this, and it'll allow us to do this. And then it can get signed off and agreed by one of the directors, for example. I think it's has to work for the business, obviously.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. One of my bugbearers in not just manufacturing, but most businesses is the lack of training that leaders have. They are normally thrust into the role because they're good at their job, so they should be good to manage people. Have you, I guess, in your career, have you seen that along the way where people have just been pushed into a room and said, "You're great, what you do. You're now a manager."
Yeah, you see that. With so many people. They are good at their job, but they sort of no one's ever explained to them what to do when a member of the team comes in tears one morning because the cat's been run over. How do I deal with that? Because a lot of places, if you work at a larger company, you just hand them over. You just ask them to speak to HR. Mm-hmm. They've had all that training. Smaller companies, it can be a challenge. But you try to be fair and reasonable. Also, we look at things about because there's some quite good stuff done by Innovate UK. Like there's sort of like peer group sessions and things like that where people can all come together, share experience, and bring out ideas and problems, and we can all work together for a solution for them and things like that.
Yeah, excellent. I've heard a lot of good things about Innovate UK as well, so that's a good plug. Is that are they connected to your business, or did you engage with them to assist on that side?
We've engaged with them a lot on the various grants and things like that. But also, they approach us, like either to our CEO or to myself or the R&D director, for example, as someone that they would like to have involved in one of these sessions,
Yeah, excellent. How do you think your leadership style has changed over the years? Because I'm always interested in the evolution of, because I'm a very different leader today than I was 15, 20 years ago. There's still loads of work to do, but I appreciate this difference. How do you think yours has changed over time?
Yeah, I think I used to have an issue that I kind of adopted a one size fits all to everybody. Mm-hmm. So I took over the years I've come to appreciate that everyone needs a different tactic when you're leading them. You can't just. Some people need to an arm around them. Some people need a handheld. Some people need a shove in the back to get them going and things like that. And a simple thing. Some people work best when they're given a good degree of autonomy. Some people need just a list. This is what you're doing this week, this month. These are your objectives for the month and things like that. Yeah. And also, people have different drives, different motivations. It's a lot easier if you've got someone who just works in the warehouse and just wants a bit of overtime. That's his motivation. But when you've got like a young graduate who wants to develop their career, it's not always about money with some people.
Yeah, 100%.
They want to work for an interesting company where they've got good training opportunities and development opportunities, things like that.
It's a skill, isn't it? Like you say, it's a skill which you pick up that emotional intelligence to understand what they're motivated by, and like you say, it's a really good example with if someone's pet is unwell, sometimes some people will go deal with it, but actually for someone that might be such a big deal. That person might not have kids. That person might live alone. That pet might be with them for 13 years, and that person could be so thrown by that it's going to affect them, and it's knowing, understanding people's triggers, and that takes time, I think, as a lead to learn, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I think that the pet one's a good example because it's a case of we had it at our place a few weeks ago. One of their teams, their mother's dog had died, and it's kind of like in one way you would think, well, so what? But
Yeah,
then
yeah,
it's obviously it's not the pet, it's his mother.
yeah.
His mother's extremely upset. She needs someone to keep an eye on her and that kind of thing. So
Yeah, it is. Management, I think, in many ways, is a lot harder than it used to be now because obviously it's so multifaceted before. But I think people are much better managers for that. And then for me, people will be more developed than they used to be. So I completely agree. The business is really exciting, and I can see the business, and that alone, what you're doing there with that leather is amazing. Where do you see it going? What's the sort of the next roadmap looking like for the business? What do you say? What are you
yeah,
excited by?
so we've got currently talking to a number of investors about like a 5-year plan, 10-year plan, and then the scalability of the product. So it's a case of making enough to let's create a like good quality like small scale samples that we can sell to people, and then scaling that up to making rolls of material so it can be sold at scale.
Right, amazing. How much is a T-Rex watch going to cost me then? Is that?
I can't comment at the moment, but it won't be cheap.
Yeah, yeah. I imagine they sell quite a few. Look, and this is stuff that this is why I love doing this podcast, because who would have an idea there's a business like yours around the corner from someone who's manufacturing this stuff like this in a lab? It's incredible. But this is the stuff that kids need to know about, young people need to know about, because how excited are they going to be by something like this? They just are, aren't they?
Yeah, well, exactly. I think that's one thing we're quite lucky with. There's a few companies I think in the northeast that are like that. There's like there's ourselves. There's people like Quantum DX. You've got people doing very interesting technology and
Mhm.
exciting technology. So
Yeah,
which is also a benefit to people too.
it is. We're going to say, because you got people got different purposes now. Some people could want to work for a company because they're so excited by something like that, because as a child that's what they're interested in. Another person loves animals, and if they know that you're making something, or something in the lab which is going to have a positive impact on animals like a cornea, then they want to be part of that. So and that's another thing as leader, don't you? You need to understand what people are driven by. For someone else, it might just be you're a really sustainable company with great values, and they want to work for you on that. It's huge.
Yeah, exactly right. So
There's a few. Sometimes I end this podcast with some quick fire questions, which I shall do if that's okay.
mhm.
Which you've not been warned about. So here we go. You mentioned at the start you've had some great leaders. Who's the best manager you've ever had, and why would you say?
I think it's an awkward one because obviously there's different bits from
Yeah.
different people. I used to work with a fantastic lady when I worked for a company in the railway in the defence sector. She sort of explained about well, I think emotional resilience, shall we call it? Dealing with really tight deadlines and difficult customers, difficult teams, and things like that. So she really helped with how you plan stuff, how how you recover from things and things like that, and how you cover yourself, when the board aren't giving you the support you need.
Yeah.
It could be a challenge like that. So that was a good one. Had another person who was fantastic at bringing different, very diverse people together to work together for a common goal, which I thought was very exciting. Appeal from like operations, R&D, finance, all that kind of stuff. So,
Excellent. Worst day ever as a leader, would you say?
yeah. Oof, worst day. I think it's was when someone that I'd put a lot of effort into trying to develop, and then they just spat their dummy out one day, stormed out, and that was it. So it was quite disappointing that.
Yeah. Oh. If you could wave a magic wand, how would you improve? Normally, it's the engineering, manufacturing, science. Well, what would you do to improve things if you could do?
For 3D BT or just in general?
Just in general, which would help out your industry, would you say?
I think it's trying to bring together the opportunities that the businesses have. So it's bringing together, the R&D people, the people who can provide like support, like the facilities, the infrastructure, and things like that, and the finance people who can help, help with the funding and so on.
And just finally, if you could recommend any book, audio book, podcasts, apart from this one, anything else you recommend which has helped you along the way, would you say?
I can't think of the title off the top of my head. It was I'm afraid I can't right now, Mark,
No,
but I'll dig it out.
yeah. When it gets
released,
released, you can put it in the comment section. So no, good man. But it's perfect. And what would you say you're most excited about 3D BioTissues in the next sort of 18 months? What's really exciting you?
I think we're moving part of our lab into like a new facility with a new infrastructure and stuff to support the scale up of our products. So that's quite exciting. Lots of new equipment, new toys, and things like that.
Yeah, excellent. Well, look, thank you so much for this. It's been so fascinating, Adam. I think I mentioned before that we don't know what's on our doorstep, right? And this is why I talk about all the time. But this is why companies need to engage with schools, with colleges, with parents to make sure that people do understand what's on their doorstep. Because the Northeast, the UK, it's a fantastic place. We have our challenges, but we're creating engineers, scientists, and in all sorts of wonderful industries. And this is a key example of a business which is doing just mind-blowing things, which is both important and fun at the same time. And I think if you can, as a business, you've got both of those. You're innovating, you're doing things which are just good fun and amazing. If you think that, I can't wait to hear the first piece of leather watch strap on Dinosaur, but actually you're also doing something which got some real purpose, which is helping people's lives, which is so important. So I'm so excited to see the business and the business flourish. What's the best way to contact you, or indeed the business, if anyone wants to get involved?
No, I think that the simplest thing for us is like it's our info email address. It's info@3dbiotissues.com. And I show people it does get monitored. We do look at emails that come in, so that's a really good starting point. Or just go to our website, and you'll see the all the information there.
Excellent, perfect. Well, thank you, Adam. That was really helpful. Thank you so much.
No, thanks for having me, Mark. You take care.
Thank you so much for listening or watching this episode of the Manufacturing Leaders Podcast. Please just like or subscribe. It really helps grow the show and obviously improve the industry. If you want any more information about Theo James, as I mentioned midway through the episode, please get in touch with me or the team. I would love to talk about how we can help you directly or your business. We are more than just a recruiter, and I know people say that, but it's something I'm incredibly passionate about. We are in business for much more than just a bums on seats approach. We want to help people grow. We want to help improve their lives. And ultimately, I want to work with businesses and people who share the same values as we do. And that's something I'm incredibly passionate about. So please, if that is you and you are passionate about that dream role or passionate about your people, please get in touch with me or the team. I would absolutely love to talk a bit more detail. Thank you very much. Speak soon.